morning, Ed. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, I just want to welcome everybody who's joining. Thank you for attending this first in our series of webinars that we're going to be doing here at SBK. We'll talk a little bit about what those are in a moment. First, I just want to hope and wish everybody's doing well. If you're joining from the United States in particular these days, we're concerned and always thinking about the well-being of everybody, given the circumstances that we're in. I'd also like to invite any of the attendees to add their name, company and or industry sector that they might be joining from, so that we could try to tailor a little bit more of the content to the industries and or company areas that you might be interested in. We always like to do that if we can. So with no further ado, I'm Chris McHale. I'm the co-founder and CEO of SBK & Associates. We are a technology services firm that's completely focused on accelerating and helping product development in companies. That's our sole reason for existing. And that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit today. I'm here with Ed Chung. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Ed?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I've been here with SBK for 13 years now. I'm as a manager for engineering systems and technology. I'm passionate about processes and automation that benefit R&D departments and making engineers successful at doing engineering.
Great. So let's see, we're going to be conducting a series of webinars. This is the first in the series. I actually forget how many they're going to be, but they're going to be every other week, every 2 weeks. And we'll pick a different topic each time that is related to technology and accelerating product development. You can actually see all the different topics that we'll be addressing on the registration page that you selected or you registered on to register for this webinar. So we hope to see you guys there for the next ones. And with no further ado, we will just jump right in. So this webinar, this particular one, is about engineering ops or engineering operations, which is a term that we love here at SBK, but it's not a term that's particularly familiar to a lot of people. So we're going to talk about that. What is it? Why is it important? How do you deploy it? And all of this to the purpose of how does it help you in your product development and accelerating your product development. So let's see, let's just start out, Ed. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides here. Okay, can you see that okay, Ed?
Yes.
All right, great. So why don't we start out by you explain to everybody here on this webinar call, what is engineering ops? What does it actually mean?
Sure. Engineering ops, which also runs to EngOps, enables R&D or product development teams to operate and scale efficiently, to release products better, faster, and more cost effectively. We want to help apply the right people and processes to the development process so that people can be effective. A successful EngOps team improves employee satisfaction by enabling the engineers to get exactly what they want when they want it.
Okay, that's a great start. We'll get into the meat of this in a bit. It's always good to define our terms, before we get started. And while it seems silly to define R&D or product development, there are various aspects to this. So why don't you go ahead and quickly define what we mean by that. Who is R&D or product development? Who are we talking to here?
Yeah, I think this is a group of people in a company tasked with developing products, right? Which could be hardware or software, or very commonly it's both. Also, not all R&D groups deliver externally. A significant number of R&D teams develop for internal customers. These groups also benefit from having EngOps support.
Okay, and just give us a quick overview of the fundamental goals, primary functions of R&D or product development, just so we understand what's uppermost on mind or in mind for people in R&D. What is that?
Yeah, when I'm thinking about KPIs, I'm thinking about designing, testing, and releasing products on time or before a deadline. while meeting constantly evolving requirements with an appropriate level of quality without exceeding budget, and depending on the context, within some or all regulatory guidelines.
Okay, that is a lot. So I can see why. I mean, I think that's clear to people why we're actually talking about this, and how do you attain or how do you achieve all of those goals in engineering these days? It's really challenging. So let's go ahead and move forward to talking about. Although we started to talk about this, like, why is engineering important? What is it that's about product development in particular that's changed over the last 10, 20, 30 years?
Oh yeah, I think product development has changed very much in the last 30 years. I think we maybe historically we've moved from drafting on paper into using basic MCAD applications, mixed MCAD and mechatronic solutions, right? We've seen the proliferation of engineering applications or tools which are now required to do our jobs, involving complex software development. I think in the past, in the past 30 years, we've certainly seen an integration of the different engineering areas, the different MCAD or electrical engineering or software engineering. We've seen the addition of information systems, right, to help us collect all of our data, and therefore we've seen the increased prominence and necessity for data, which is now overwhelming us and requires some processing as we go into. I think in the future now we're moving more into IoT and cloud and this very connected, dynamic, fast workplace.
I mean, it's funny to me because we've been using the term engineering operations or EngOps, for years, and there's two other groups in a company that have started to or have created over the last, I don't know, 5, 10 years or so, a similar role or a similar function. It's usually a department. One is sales for sales ops or sales operations, and the other one, more recently, is marketing or marketing ops. And it's really interesting that those have developed. Those have become current terms that people are using, and definitely are creating those kinds of functions and departments within their sales and marketing departments. And yet, engineering continues to kind of go along the way it has. I wonder if you have any insight as to why that might be. It's not that important, I suppose, but it's an interesting point.
Yeah, I also wonder that it's a mystery to me too why EngOps is not as commonly understood, and its value isn't described often or as clearly. We think it's because of examples such as engineering is fundamentally comprised of technology proficient people.
Right.
So it's informally or unconsciously, there are EngOps teams or people internal to the engineering R&D department, right? Even if they don't have that label.
Right.
I think much or all of the skill set in IT exists in engineers who are the most brilliant people in our companies, right?
Well, we think so anyway. All right. So that we've now, determined that engineering technology, as you've kind of already described, is now essential to the proper functioning of your engineering department. I think that kind of goes without saying. And I think these are some of the reasons why. You want to talk to these, Ed?
Yeah, I think a lot of times we run into these problems where the tools, and I guess to reword it backwards is the tools don't speed up the engineers, right? And these things that we get from external, from cloud or from IT or IS groups, sometimes they don't support my processes, my engineering processes. They have manual steps, right? workarounds. To put it nicely, they have workarounds that I need to do in order to fit it into meeting my requirements, which workarounds are going to cost me, make impacts to my timeline and deadlines and costs. And then, you know, if I can be a little bit metaphysical here, I think a lot of times the tools or processes in place don't bring my data to life, right? They don't give me the information in a way that is actionable, right? I want a problem that I can solve, and I think sometimes some people are lacking that clarity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, and to help our audience, you know, understand now that they're starting to understand what engineering ops is and why it's important, maybe we can speak a little bit to the key qualifications for an engineering ops group or people in engineering ops.
Yeah, I think good communication is absolutely the very most important, right? I think so much of success in this team is about bridging the communication gap between two different or three different or five different groups. I think you need an expertise in the engineering technology, right? I think one of the other important things is being able to analyze data and optimize its presentation. I think you need to be able to report on the data that you've analyzed. You need to come up with processes that are consistent and effective. You need to manage projects, right? Typically, these are moving mountains, not so you have to get the village to come help. And training, right? I think training is sometimes forgotten at the end. Don't forget the training, and then of course compliance, right? I think this is very important for quite a few industries.
Right, particularly for the regulated ones, but really maybe even almost every industry's got some aspect of that these days. So I thought it might help everybody if we drew a picture of our view of engineering ops and how it's related to engineering and IT. This is a kind of a first draft of a picture, I think I told you, Ed, and we're hoping to make it better. And yeah, and if anybody even has any insights or recommendations, we'd love to hear what they should be. There's some overlap between these three. I'll let you talk through it a little bit, Ed, but we're not showing the overlap particularly well. But the key thing to take away is that these are three departments or functions within a company that are working very closely together, but have different responsibilities. That's right.
Yeah, I think that's true. And specifically talking about the overlap between engineering and IT, right? So much of engineering happens using technology, but my goal as an engineer is to I have separate goals, right? Product development, reach some milestone, meet some requirements, maybe some quality requirements. The technology, the IT departments typically have a separate goal. Their goal is about governance and security, right? They have experts in, you know, disaster recovery and infrastructure setup and being cost effective in those ways. There's an overlap area where sometimes they feel a little bit at odds, right? Where someone is saying, you know, need more resources, and someone else is saying use less resources.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's exactly where engineering ops comes in, right? I think part of it is having a separate group there to talk to both sides and talk about their and specifically manage the applications and processes. You know, the automation and DevOps that require skill sets from both sides, some depth in the engineering and depth in the IT areas.
Yeah, one thing that I've always thought is that the real benefit of engineering ops, and the same would go for marketing ops or sales ops, is the real understanding of the business of product development. You have to understand that business first. You have to understand how it works, what's important, so that you can then tailor and adapt the appropriate technology and people and so on to it. Yeah, it'd be pretty hard to do, I think, from IT, especially if you're responsible for things that are serving the entire company. Do you have an example, Ed, of something maybe we've done just to give people an idea of how they could do it or how they would benefit from engineering ops in their own company?
Yeah. So commonly, in an effort to be, because we have our brilliant engineers, right? In an effort to be efficient, these engineers find really, really effective and innovative solutions. But those solutions don't always get documented perfectly or distributed well. Or sometimes they get distributed so well that the original engineer gets trapped into spending their time supporting, this this tool or application at the cost of meeting their own engineering deadlines. So what an EngOps group can do, right, they can be a centralized shared group with a specific mission to standardize and manage and promote these applications or processes across multiple departments. This would remove those times where team A is using a different software build process than team B. How others can do this is sometimes or often all it takes is a single person to build that bridge, right? Set up a meeting, find someone, who is sort of stuck doing something they don't want to do in the R&D department. Find someone in IT who is frustrated that they can't finish what they're being asked to by this engineer because it's not described well, and get them both in a meeting, help talk to them, and identify what are the common threads between to come up with a good solution. I lost sound. I think you're on mute, Chris.
Sorry about that. My bad. Do you have a particular story or something that we've done for one of our customers that just short little vignette maybe that might help illustrate that? Or if you don't, we can move on.
Let's move on.
Okay. Because I know you have some other stories later on. Okay. So now we've kind of established that, drawn a picture of engineering ops, kind of brought that to life a little bit for people so they can understand what it is. The first question that comes up, I think for most people is, why not IT or engineering? Why do you need this separate group, right, or function to do these things?
Yeah, I think IT sometimes lacks the adequate expertise in engineering systems. And also I'll add, engineering's sometimes lack the expertise in information systems or processes, right? It's clear to me that they can't all learn everything because it's a slightly impossible task, right? Knowing the details, every single function or click of every single application. Technology is growing exponentially, right? It's certainly growing and is becoming increasingly critical to the success of our companies, right? New SaaS and cloud tools are being introduced with a new set of problems, security problems, performance problems, and a deep understanding of the people and processes is essential to proper implementation and support of the technology. I often say, who better to support the engineers than other engineers?
That's right. Yeah. So just in terms of defining our terms a little bit here, this may seem like a strange question, but what do we mean when we talk about IT or information technology? Because I find that it means different things to different people at different companies, honestly, and it can be a somewhat charged term at times. So what do we mean when we talk about that, and what is the role? Really, is the question that the typical IT department is playing in a company.
Yeah, I think that's a very common problem because it's not well defined, right? It's ambiguous. I think an IT department varies between different companies. I've seen in companies where their IT department includes EngOps, but never labeled EngOps, but it includes that skill set. I've also seen IT departments where they very much don't include it. One thing that is very common, almost always, I see that an IT is internal technology focused, right?
Yep.
They're usually focused on things inside of the company, not outside, not supporting customers or supporting customers using the products. I think IT, the purview of IT almost always includes things like infrastructure and corporate applications, Microsoft Office, security, email, and the governance of those systems.
Yeah. I think also as one of the key things we won't talk as much about in this particular webinar, but what we're seeing a lot is the introduction of more and more smart products or connected products. And so as those products become connected and there's a whole infrastructure or platform supporting those products, they are customer facing, right? Sometimes in the oil and gas and utilities industry, they used to call this OT or operational technology, and they're starting to come together. And it's very hard, I think, for an internally focused group like IT that is working incredibly hard to support the people in the company to also then pivot and support completely different service level requirements, with customers and do that as well. And so we've actually seen that the development of engineering operations in some companies will provide that OT support, right, for the connected products. So then if we moving along, then what is the importance then of, I guess, the whole engineering, why is this an important topic, and why is it so important to recognize that IT isn't perhaps the right group to do it unless they changed and kind of modified what they were doing?
Yeah, I think it's, yes, it's absolutely important, right, that we realize that IT cannot provide all the support to all of the people, to all of the processes and all of the technology, right? It's just too much. It's too much for any one person to do while they're worrying about bigger picture things. I think if we continue to not understand that, then we'll expect too much from them, right? And expecting too much from a resource spread thin will further my engineers' frustration with the lack of adequate and timely support. Engineers get frustrated if they can't, right, release their goals and their timelines and their budget constraints. I think unhappy engineers sometimes look for greener pastures.
That's for sure. And I think the last thing too there with not with lacking, it's what I already mentioned before, but lacking the specialized or dedicated engineering ops function in a company is we've seen that some of our clients that it then becomes difficult to develop and manage IoT in their products. So they certainly will have engineers that are capable of the technical skills that are required to create a smarter connected product with sensors, collect data. They could even stand up a kind of an initial cloud platform to do that, but then they quickly run out of gas. I mean, they're supposed to be designing products, not managing them. And so I think that's a perfect role for an engineering ops team or person to take on, working with IT, of course, but really taking primary ownership of the uptime and the functioning and performance of that now customer-facing platform, and the data, of course, that the products are collecting, which is critically important. Do you have any stories that you want to tell us about this, Ed? An example of how how engineering ops versus IT, or not to, certainly not to speak badly of IT, but just a situation where they were over their heads or were not able to adequately support engineering, where an engineering ops department could really do that and succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was recently a situation where SolidWorks PDM, there was someone using SolidWorks PDM, and they did their own internal proof of concept, and they wanted to use this for the entire company. Right? They handed this off to IT, and it didn't go well. Right? It wasn't someone's fault. It was everyone's fault. IT was unable to provide these systems because they didn't have an understanding of the integration between MCAD and ECAD in this case, right? Specifically SolidWorks and Altera Quartus here. They also didn't understand the requirements for remote offices and people who are now, right? Many people are working from home. They're not always sitting next to a server. Engineers, myself included, get frustrated when it takes too many minutes to open a file. Right? So they were unable to implement a solution, and they needed, their argument was they needed more definition from the R&D team, right? They needed more defined requirements, more detailed requirements. How slow is too slow? Exactly where are these people located? But the R&D team, right? They have other jobs to do. Their job wasn't to handhold this application, and oftentimes in those meetings that I was sitting in, sometimes the jargon was a little bit different, right? The definition of requirement is actually slightly different between different groups.
And it's also a vocabulary problem sometimes I've noticed, right? Where an engineer means one thing and they have their vocabulary, and IT has a different vocabulary, and they actually, even though they're both technical, have a hard time communicating on the same page.
That's right. I mean, we're lucky when the shared jargon, nobody knows what it means, right? I think the worst part is when the jargon is the same word, but it's used differently, and then there can be some conflicts there. And that's why I think, just like you're doing, Chris, right? It's so useful to define terms going into those meetings, during those meetings, write them down. And that's exactly what we did, right? We stepped into these meetings, we listened to both sides, we took notes, and we color coded the jargon so that we translated, what it means, for what the word security means to the engineers versus to IT, and identified how a solution can actually, how a thing can solve the problem for both people, because they're actually making different requests, right? We translated the engineering requirements into IT requirements. And then, since we were there talking, we offered to take the hardest parts from IT and the biggest roadblocks for engineering, and get those pieces done, right? And those examples were those biggest roadblocks where we moved their SolidWorks PDM into a cloud-hosted environment. The biggest roadblock from IT was configuring the SQL clustering to work and replicate the data geographically in order to meet the engineers' requirements for performance. And at the end of the day, everyone was happy. IT was happy because it got done. They weren't getting, in the hot seat. Right. And the engineers were able to collaborate quickly and effectively, regardless of whether someone was working from home, working from Asia, working from North America. And I think every time they are not sending a document via email attachment, I hope they remember to thank us in the back of their mind.
As you're talking and you're describing the story, it does strike me too that, I know sometimes IT can feel perhaps awkward if an engineering operations team or set of people is involved. And yet, as you've so aptly described right here, it helps them enormously because they get frustrated too. You know, they don't understand what the engineers are asking. They don't understand what the purpose is because they're not in the business of engineering every day. And we've already talked about vocabulary problems, right? But then you, or you know, in this case, the engineering operations team was able to make their lives also so much easier. In addition to getting this done and removing that roadblock and allowing the engineers to effectively do their job faster and better and more efficiently. So yeah, it can be awkward or a little troublesome sometimes, I think, but I mean, we work incredibly hard to team with IT. I mean, sometimes we talk about bridging the gap, right, between IT and engineering a bit, working with both teams and kind of helping both teams. That makes sense. Okay, let's actually move over to our last area that we wanted to talk about. Let me just go ahead and share my screen again here. And this is really on the topic of data, which is an incredibly important topic these days, a very rich topic, and one that is becoming more and more important to entire companies in all departments, but also to engineering. So what does engineering ops have to do with data?
Yeah, Chris, there's a gold mine of information inside of these systems and applications, right? Often database-driven applications, and I think it is underutilized. It's untapped, not analyzed, and the value is lost because no one's looking at it. I think there's opportunities to present the data to leaders and engineers and teams and consider to get insights out of that, right? I think that's talking about, now I'm talking about something called data transparency. In today's modern workforce, I don't think this is optional anymore. I think this is imperative that data transparency does not require weeks of research and a dedicated analyst to give me that information.
So exactly what do you mean by data transparency? You should probably define that because I don't know everybody knows what that term means.
Yeah, I think data transparency is the ability to easily access and manipulate or view or work with the data. I think it has to be easy to do no matter where the data is located or where I am located relative to the data. And also it needs to be regardless of where the data came from, right? Application created the data. Oftentimes these disparate data sources I need to merge in order to identify or analyze patterns.
Yeah, no silos, no data silos, right? I mean, that has
right.
to be, has to be gone. Otherwise you can't do what you need to do.
And here I am trying to make action items, right? So I do want some confidence or assurance that the data that is being reported is accurate, right? Before I make decisions.
Right. So in talking about data engineering in general, I'm just using that term kind of loosely, but in talking about data and accessing data and data engineering, people frequently talk about actionable insights. It's a term that everybody loves to use, and it's a very important term because data, for the sake of data, is worthless, and unless data is presented and viewed in a way that provides actionable insights, it's not particularly useful. So what is the word, or what does the term actionable insights actually mean?
Yeah, so actionable insights, first I need to collect the data back, right? Then I need to identify patterns. These are my insights, right? My insights into the data. And finally, I need to create some action items out of it if I want it to change going forward, right? If I have the data and I don't have any insights or patterns, then it's actually not very useful, right? On the flip side, if I see these patterns, but I have no way to fix it or I have no action to do, then again, this was not the most cost benefit productive use of my time making that pie graph.
Yeah, and I've noticed I think we've noticed also that in all of the engineering applications and systems, just like any other in the company, there is a lot of data. There's data that is collected. There's data that is sitting there, and however, it takes effort and time application to create ways to visualize it and then provide these insights, right? And you have to understand the business part and you have to understand the data in order to do that, which is why I think engineering ops is such a perfect function to do this, because the engineering ops understands the business of engineering and it needs to also understand the data. Actually, there was a quote, if you don't mind, from Harvard Business Review I was reading. I don't have the actual article, but I can get it for anybody who's interested. And I thought it was really telling. It said, they were talking about data and data transparency and so on. And it said, a much bigger competitive advantage is to harness valuable data, having the necessary skills to translate that data into meaningful insights, and above all, being able to act on those insights. In our view, data without insights are trivial, and insights without action are pointless, which kind of beautifully summarizes what we've been talking about here. So what is expected from product development, from engineering really, in the area of data? What are they expected to be able to do nowadays?
I think changes are happening, right? Where now we have to, as an example of IoT, we have to incorporate data collection into our products to enable remote management or other things, right? That data collection can be used internally by us to further develop our products, right? It helps us stay ahead of our competitors. I think this is a new capability set, right? That lives inside of an engineering department. I think this is insights out of the sustainment of products. Since everything is so interconnected, it really does give us an opportunity, right? No longer needing to send out surveys or wait for feedback from specific doctors or hospitals. We can sort of get that information live right away.
It used to be that just creating a great product was the goal of engineering and the only purpose and mission of engineering, but I think those days are over. I mean, certainly you need to have great products still, but these days, if the products are not at least moving towards being connected in some way, shape, or form, or data being collected in a way, even maybe not, perhaps not even data about necessarily what the product is doing, but sometimes just data about how the product is functioning or not functioning, which then can inform the engineering department how to design or develop that the second or the next release of that product better. That's a big push these days as well. And all of it comes down to, it's almost bringing the customer and the engineer closer together. Customer's no longer somebody way out there that's using your product. It's somebody who is using it, and you're able to see, if you do this correctly, how and why they're using the product so that it can inform how you do this better. Are you seeing some of that also in the groups that you're supporting and working with?
Absolutely. I think that's, yes, very much so.
So one thing that's interesting, I think, with data, and we can, let's see, I think we don't have really anything else to show vis-a-vis the slides, so let me pull that off. I think one thing that's really interesting about data is that data is typically viewed as something that lives within IT or managed by IT, whether it's database management or data engineering or even the data science part that we see. That is and that's definitely in their wheelhouse and something that they have to be good at, right? But I think that one thing we're seeing, because we've had to even change the kinds of skills and capabilities that we have within SBK, right, on this, is that we need more skill, and people need more skill in really understanding the data from a data consumer's perspective, to curate that data so that it is telling a good story and a correct story to the people who are making decisions. And in order to do that, you absolutely have to understand how that business works. And so this is the part, I think, where it can be very hard for IT. I think IT and engineering ops can work together very closely. IT bringing that kind of data understanding, and engineering ops bringing a little bit of that data understanding, but a lot of the understanding of the business. Do you have any examples or stories, Ed, where you've done some of this or helped any of our clients with some of this so that can bring that to life?
Yeah, I can think of so many examples, right? In your, it's so true. It's so true that you, here's this example of IT has the data, right? They have the databases. Engineering has the insights, right? And either side without the other really can't be successful, right? I think oftentimes engineers and IT don't realize what you have until you see it on a screen, on a paper. An example where this happens very commonly is there was a customer doing, medical device companies, they're often buying other companies, right? And whenever they buy another company, they want to ingest their data. I think there are a couple of ways to do it. One way is don't touch them, leave them segregated, not going to worry about it, right? It's not the most efficient, but the flip side is when they bring them in and they want to take all of their CAD data and migrate it into their system, into their Agile PLM. There was a situation where 3 years ago they did this, and IT said, we can do data migrations. Here's the migration, box A, box B, moved it over. It's been 3.5 years now, and engineering is still, the R&D department still has, they started with 3 full-time, and now they have 1 full-time person who goes through that data that's in post-migration and modifies it, cleans it up so that it can be used. Because when IT moved it over, they did a great job of moving the data, but they didn't have the insight to know where the data could be improved. That customer brought us in now, and now we are spending 6 months upfront looking at that data, right? What we've done is simply gotten everyone in a room. We get things up on PowerPoint slides, and we say, lessons learned from the last time. What are we looking for? What should the description or the part number format be? What should we do with the characters that are illegal? It sometimes feels a little bit grueling to go through those, but every single time we finish those meetings, there's this sense of accomplishment, right? Look at all the time we are saving from the engineers manually doing it. And it's not because of a special skill set, except for communication, right? Let me add that if there is one thing that I think I said this in the beginning, but I'll say it again, just get them in a room, right? Sit there, find a person in IT, find a person in engineering, sit them in a room together, buy them pizza, right? And everyone loves pizza, and make them talk, right? Where opportunities where IT can, do something in 1 minute that saves engineering 1 month, right? Where is a compromise where engineering inside of the data, we don't need to fix that piece of data because we'll do it manually afterwards.
Right. It's interesting as you're talking about this. I'm trying to also think of ways that, so we've described all of this, described engineering ops, kind of the role, the function, why it's important. And how is it that somebody, maybe you could think out loud a little bit, how is it that any of the people that are on the call here could implement some version of engineering ops themselves in their own company I might grab that slide that talks about the qualifications and throw that back up here for you. But how would they do this? How could they do this? I was thinking, just to start you off, that more likely than not, you would pick, I think, a person in engineering, because the person in engineering understands the business part, which is probably the harder part to understand. You could also pick somebody in IT as sort of the point person for it, but then they would, I guess that could work too if they had some engineering chops or background. But if you had to just think out loud, how would you, if you jumped into a company right now and you got hired and somebody said, yeah, and you're an engineer, let's just say, and somebody said, we need some kind of engineering ops function here. How would you go about doing that?
First, I need to generate, here's this term, EngOps. I need to generate awareness of that term with my CEO, my CTO, my directors, right? Say, hey, this is a thing that needs to happen. I'm going to make up this term so that we can all agree, let's dedicate some amount, right? I don't know if it is a single person in engineering or a single person in IT. I'd like it to be both, right? Please, engineering manager, dedicate 4 hours a week of this person's time into something called EngOps. Hey, IT manager, dedicate 4 hours a week of this person's time into something called EngOps. I think that would be my first step, right? To get those two people talking together and building a bridge of communication, so that when issues come up from engineering to go into IT, they funnel through a single person who has time dedicated and available to thinking about what those requests are, right? Then that person, let's say in engineering, can identify when there are similar requests, can identify when there are two people doing using different MCAT applications. And then they can also get to know the capabilities of a counterpart in the IT department who is now also a single point and starts to build a historical knowledge of what the jargon means and what the vocabulary means and what the needs are. I think that is, it's not trivial to ask for that time, but at a very minimum, just labeling it, right? I think, and having awareness of it with my management chain would make a big difference in any place we go.
And don't you think in some way that even if this hasn't been formally done, I find that more often than not, there is that person in engineering, at least, and sometimes that person's in IT, who has just decided that they're going to unconsciously volunteer for that role. And then they end up being that go-to person. But the problem is if it's not a recognized role and the time hasn't been specifically allocated to it, it could be a thankless job, first of all, but then also they're not maybe putting the time and attention to it that they really need to. And I think if you were going to start with engineering ops in a function in a company, Ed, what is the first area that you would focus on? I mean, these areas of project management and compliance and analytics and data, those are great and those are needed, but what's kind of the first set of things that you think would be most important that engineering ops person or team should start focusing on?
I'm a little torn. Forgive me for giving you two answers for this. On one hand, I want to say, go find someone in the mechanical engineering team, right? I think oftentimes those guys, you can get some big wins because they're doing things manually, because that's their expertise, and there are opportunities to automate, make things better, make things faster, right? Don't have to compromise on slowness, don't have to email files back and forth. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. On the flip side, the very, very flip side of that is the software engineering groups. The software engineers have this huge, complex, intertwined spider web of applications that they're relying on. I think they have huge deadlines and huge complexities, and they often want help, right? So if you're an IT person looking for a place where you can make a benefit to someone, if you walk into that meeting, they would love for you to help, but they're also scared, right? They're scared that is going to cause problems or something's going to break. So that is a larger bite, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there to standardize and document and improve.
And also just to manage that software engineering tool chain, which is right now we're really getting into what people are typically referring to as build release, but some people have adopted the philosophy of DevOps, which is kind of a subset of engineering ops, I would say. Kind of a similar thing, right? Where you've got your developers and you used to have your operations people who were managing the software in production, oversitting in IT. And some years ago, that kind of came up, I think, with Agile, with the whole Agile approach to software development. They decided, well, having these two silos doesn't really work very well. Developers are forever throwing stuff over the fence, and then the operations guys are trying to catch it and complaining about this and that. And so, again, more of a philosophical approach. They said the developers and the operation people really kind of need to be together, need to sit together, they need to understand each other, they need to work together on the same team. Looks a lot like engineering ops. And as we've said before, I think when we play the engineering operations role at our clients, we also do quite a bit of DevOps, more on the ops side, right, for our clients. But that kind of philosophy, the DevOps philosophy, I think is a great way to look at this as well. And so how did that start? Well, it started by either an engineer, software engineer saying, okay, I'm going to learn the ops side of this more, and then I'm going to help there. Or an IT person saying, okay, I no longer want to be in the silo over here. I'm going to move over. I'm going to sit with dev. I'm going to understand the code to a certain degree, not in depth, but enough to understand what to do with it and how to deploy it properly. And that's kind of where all that came from. To me, the same thing could happen here pretty simply and pretty straightforwardly. But what I would say is that besides having people, or at least a person with some of these qualifications, because this is important to have some of these qualifications, not necessarily all of them, but some. The most important thing is that the leaders of engineering understand that this is kind of a mind shift that is going to happen. It's not going to be engineering over here and IT over here. It's going to be a philosophical kind of coming together of the two so that they can work together. But they need to be, as you've described, those point people. There needs to be at least one person who says, okay, I'm going to lead this, and that they have the support of their manager in doing that, VP of engineering or director of engineering, whatever the role may be. Do you have anything to add to that, or are you seeing that same thing as well?
I think that's right. I think as an aside, managers and engineers are super dependable, right? As long as there's recognition, whether that's through a label or just knowing, right? I think would make a big difference.
Right. I mean, I think it goes without saying that it would be easier to bring a team like us in because we know how to do this. And we have all of these skill sets in-house, but that's not always possible for people. And so what we're more interested in is kind of enabling this whole engineering operations mentality at various product development groups, because we've just seen such an enormous benefit from approaching engineering or product development this way. I mean, to me, I don't even know how you would do it any other way at this point, because it just seems so incredibly beneficial. I know you would say the same thing since you're living it every day.
That's right.
Well, at this point, I think we will just open it up to see if there's any questions from our attendees, if there's anybody that would wish to have us discuss something in more depth. And if not, we'll give everybody, I guess, 7 or 8 minutes back in their day. I'll just wait a moment. I don't see any. Okay, so anyway, Ed, Thank you so much for joining me and having this conversation. I really appreciate your time and your expertise. And either we'll see you again in a couple of weeks or someone else, but have a great rest of your day. And thanks again. Thanks everybody for attending. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Talk to you soon.